thank you all for joining us. This is the 2022 NISO Annual Members Meeting. It's a report of our 2021/22 activities. My name is Todd Carpenter. I'm the Executive Director of NISO. The NISO staff will be joining me throughout the meeting, so a shout out to all of them. And so let's get started. What we're going to cover today is just some grounding, first of all, on our vision, mission, and strategic priorities. That'll tie together a lot of the what we've done and how we've done it as we describe the work that we've done over the last year plus. I'll do a little bit of reflection about 2021 and 2022 so far. Cover the NISO, some trends in NISO's membership in 2021 and into 22, as well as NISO's finances, and then look into the looking glass into 22, 23, and beyond. We'll then be joined by Neti Legacy, who will cover the NISO Standards Program and activities that we've been undertaking in that program. Alice Meadows will describe some of our initiatives with regard to diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility. And then Jason Griffey will provide an update on NISO Plus 21, as well as looking forward. We'll have time, I expect, for some open discussion of NISO activities. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A or chat functionality. We'll keep an eye on both of those. If anything is pressing, we will address those questions as they come up. Otherwise, we'll open for a free conversation towards the end of the meeting. My expectation is that this might not take 90 minutes, but depends on how much lively conversation there is. We are recording today's program, so we'll be sharing that with the members. So be aware if you want to say anything. Just be aware that this is being recorded. We will post this out to the NISO membership next week as part of Information Organized, our monthly newsletter. Before we begin, as is our tradition, we would like to acknowledge that the land upon which our office sits in Baltimore, Maryland, is on the rooted and unceded traditional territories of the Piscataway, Susquehannock, and Nanticoke peoples. It is also the current contemporary home of the community of the Lumbee people. For more information, there's a fantastic website that describes the native and indigenous cultures that stewarded the land, and you can take a look at it at that link. So I want to start off, first of all, with the vision of what we're trying to achieve within NISO. So we have a vision in which that we can create a world where everyone can benefit from the unfettered exchange of information. We are trying to remove barriers to access of information, as well as facilitate the distribution and exchange of information, as well as its long-term preservation. All of these things are tied to the standards that we create. And we do this by trying to achieve our mission, which is to build knowledge, to foster discussions, and advance authoritative standards development through collaboration among cultural, scholarly, scientific, and professional communities. So we exist to enhance knowledge, to talk about trends in our community, and then using that conversation, move it towards the development of standards and best practices in a collaborative way amongst our stakeholders to achieve ideally unfettered access to information, and the distribution of content. In 2020, NISO launched a 3-year strategic initiative and outlined our strategic goals. I'll go through each of those and then highlight some of the things that are part of that. And you'll start to see a trend in some of the things that we have done as an organization and how all of the pieces fit together. So we'll start off first with diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. This is an important strategic goal for NISO, as it is with the entire community. That takes on several different valences. We first of all want to focus on increasing participation of early career professionals in our space and trying to build their engagement and activity in NISO, as well as help to foster their careers. We also wanted to identify and develop new communities and stakeholders that we can engage as well as serve with our work. We also want to develop, and we did develop and implement a DEIA policy. We've also launched a DEIA committee that can manage and inform our activities as it relates to DEIA. A fourth element of this inclusivity project is focused on increasing international participation in our activities. The second core element of NISO's strategic plan is focused on thought leadership. And the first element of this strategic goal is to focus on establishing NISO Plus as an influential and impactful forum for thought leadership and discussion that then fosters collaboration and innovation. I think we've done a fantastic job with NISO Plus, and Jason will describe that in more detail. We also want to identify future trends and create forums, both physical and virtual, that can help anticipate the future needs of the community and move us in directions that drive towards actionable and valuable outputs. So it's not just thought leadership for thought leadership's sake, it is thought leadership with a purpose that drives to innovation and implementation, and as that regards to standards and technology development in our space. So we want, through that thought leadership, to develop and maintain relevant activities in support of advancing information services, particularly in the humanities and social sciences and government organizations. Those are core community members that we also want to serve. Then the third element of this is, of course, the work that we do with regards to standards and making the community more efficient through the use of standards. We want to do that through three different ways. We want to increase the transparency of the standards process, and particularly NISO's role in that process. And we, of course, want to develop fantastic standards and best practices in the community. We also want to encourage their adoption. Simply publishing a standard and putting it on the shelf and saying, hey, we did this thing, isn't really useful. It's not really the end goal of what we're trying to achieve. It is the creation of those standards and the adoption of those standards and best practices in the community that really drive what we're trying to achieve. And then the third element of this is also draw attention to and build awareness of standards adoption and use in our community. Because again, we not only want people to do things, we want people to be aware that they're doing things in a standardized way and build a community of practice here. And then the fourth element of our current strategic plan is on community development. Community development is important because we want to build a strong and engaged community, both because that's how we get our work done through the engagement of our members, but it also supports the organization financially. So we want to build that community and drive membership to support our activities. We want to build community awareness and understanding of our outputs and our activities, our educational programs. And then we also want to optimize our training so that it addresses the information management needs of our community. There is one more thing that the board has been discussing. It's not part of our current strategic plan, although it has come up a lot over the past year, and that is the issue of strategic growth. And how do we manage our transformation and growth in the community in a sustainable way, that we are continuing to execute at a very high level the programs, the standards development work that we have, and do so in a way that is sustainable as well as manageable for us as an organization and the community. We have been, over the past couple of years, and we'll get into more details shortly, been asked to do more and more. There are increasing needs for standards, best practices, and community consensus around the work that NISO does. NISO is being recognized for that and as a trusted partner in that work. And how do we manage that growth moving forward? Increasingly, projects don't end with publication. There's often standing committees that get developed after a project is done. And how do we maintain that growth over time? If we're continually adding new projects, old projects don't really go away. They continue in a maintenance or a continuous maintenance or a promotional capacity. We don't end work anymore. We keep it going. And that leads to an ever larger portfolio of work. And how do we manage that activity in a reasonable way so that new projects don't fall behind, or old projects don't get reviewed on their schedule? And how do we do that and ensure that we're hitting all of the targets that we have in terms of productivity, and do so in a manageable fashion? That is a big challenge that NISO will be facing over in the coming months. So, a little bit of reflections from my perspective on 2021 and into a little bit into 2022. We had some challenges, as we all know. The pandemic has continued, but fortunately NISO has persisted. NISO was primarily a virtual-based organization prior to the pandemic. And once the world kind of got used to working remotely and engaging remotely and kind of getting its feet back under itself in 2021, NISO really took off. We were busier in 2021 than we have ever been, and that has continued. In part, this is due to the NISO Plus conference and how we've positioned NISO Plus, not only as a forum for thought leadership, as I discussed, but also as a way to engage and excite the community about new projects. So we've continued to receive new projects over the transom. So new people are always bringing us their ideas about projects that, potential new projects to work on in the community. We've also taken NISO Plus and generated other ideas out of that. And that workflow has been a great success. We have 4 definitive projects already underway because of NISO Plus, with another 2 more coming out of 2022's conference. This is spurring an increased engagement by the community, an awareness of who we are, what we're doing, and how that functions, but also at NISO as a forum where that activity can take place. We've also been able to attract the attention and support from funding bodies to support the work that we're doing, which is also gratifying and fantastic, and many thanks to the organizations that support our work. We've also had great success with our diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility initiatives. Alice will talk about that in more detail later. But I really feel like it's making a meaningful difference in the conversations around those issues. And NISO is contributing in a variety of ways through C4 Disc, with our membership there, but also with our community conversations and the forums that we're creating. And I think eventually we'll get to the place of some concrete development work as it relates to DEIA. And then finally, our educational programs have continued to serve the community very robustly. We had 30 events, and several of those included, multi-part events like our training series, which is an eight-part series. So, we're almost hitting 50 events per year, or possibly more than 50 events per year for our community. As I mentioned, just some quantification of the successes that we've had since January. We have published 7 new recommended practices or standards. We've issued 4 more drafts for public comment over that time period. And we've launched 8 new projects. And to put that in perspective, prior to the pandemic, or prior to the merger with Enphase, we would average about 3 projects a year. So we're almost triple our 2017 productivity in terms of new projects. And you start to see why the issue of strategic growth is becoming important. 8 new projects a year over a 4-year period. And if you think that each of those projects just keeps going with a standing committee or ongoing development work, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we could have 30 or 40 more projects than we do right now. We also secured 2 new grants last year, one for the Controlled Digital Lending Project, and just recently, just today, announced the Sloan Foundation has awarded us a grant for work on the Retractions Project, the CORAC project. We've also seen some tremendous growth in terms of our membership. We have 146 new members since January of 2021. I'll talk a little bit more about membership in a moment. In 2021, the virtual NISO Plus registrations was over 850, which is fantastic if you think about the number of people that we've been able to engage in these conversations. We regularly publish information on our website, in our information portal. By my count, it was about 558 stories published in Information Organized over the last 18 or so months. And as I mentioned, our educational programs, the 50 or so events that we had in 2021 attracted more than 2,200 people. Or at least unique attendee logins, and sometimes more than one person is sitting there. So, well over 2,200 people are participating in our activities, which is fantastic. Some things going on behind the scenes at NISO, so in addition to the obvious things that we've been doing. We migrated earlier this year to a new Higher Logic platform, which is the back-end information management portal for engaging our members and voting and working groups and document management. This was a many-month process to launch this new back-end system. In some ways, it's similar to and functions in some ways similar to the previous system, but it has a better user interface and a lot more functionality. We launched that earlier this spring. Hopefully, you all have had a chance to use it and find it useful and an improvement. We're also doing some other back-end systems development work. I'll save you the boring systems interoperability talk, but we are doing as much as we can to be as efficient as possible in our technology use, in serving our members, in serving the working groups, in serving the community And the back-end technology helps us do that more effectively. Another thing that we launched in 2021, was we took over management of the Pid Forum, which is for community forum for persistent identifiers. We have been engaged in standardization around persistent identifiers for many years. Part of what we do internationally is to serve that community. And this is another element of trying to build the thought leadership and conversation and community around some of what we do. And NISO's taken on a leadership role in helping to foster those conversations around the persistent identifiers. I'm also very pleased about how we have expanded internationally. This is a map of the countries that were engaged in NISO Plus participation. And again, Jason is going to talk in more detail about this. But I love the fact that many organizations around the world are now engaging in NISO's activities in ways that they hadn't previously. And it's so refreshing to see the number of circles which represent countries engaged in our work expanding. This is a strategic priority for NISO. I often say, despite our name, National Information Standards Organization, we are an international organization. About 20% of our members are based outside of the United States. And that is a trend which is growing. We're pleased to have welcomed many new members outside of the United States in the last 2 years. And I hope that we will do a lot more to serve the international community and focus our work to serve international engagement moving forward. One of the ways in which we do that is participation in ISO, the International Organization of Standards. We serve as the secretariat for the ISO Subcommittee on Identification, not indentation, autocorrect, I'll fix that. Subcommittee on Identification and Description. This is the ISO committee that is responsible for the persistent identifiers, ISBN, ISSN, DOI is standardized there, the ISAN, ISRC for different media. So we are responsible for ensuring that that committee functions properly and projects are moving forward at that level as well. Over the past year, that subcommittee has published revisions to the ISSN standard, the revision of the bibliographic references standard, that's ISO 690. We just this month published a new Principles of Identification document. That was a group that I actually was chair of. And then also minor updates to the International Standard Music Number, the Audiovisual Number, and the International Standard Work Codes. Throughout the past year, NISO and its membership have participated in 4 ISO plenary meetings, as well as engaged on well over 30 different ISO working groups. And this is a way in which NISO members can engage in international standards development is through NISO's processes. So I'm going to circle back to our membership. Membership represents the core of NISO's revenues. It represents a core of our activities, and they are really the people who not only vote and vet the work that we do, but they're also the primary source of participants in working groups. And so the strength of our organization is really tied to the strength of our membership. I'm happy to say that we've added 10 new voting members between 2021 and 2022. Some large organizations welcoming back, some new organizations to our community, as well as a couple as well as several who are based outside of the United States. Europe, PMC, Standards Australia, the Asociación de Estados Historios de Tecna. These are all organizations and RILM also based outside of the United States. So engaging an international community is really important. And fortunately in 2022, we only saw a modest decline in non-renewals this year. That has been an issue over the years. We've also welcomed new LSA members, our Library Standards Alliance members. There were 8 new LSA members who've joined our organization, so many thanks to them for joining. As well as we've been working over the last several years in partnership with Consortium. And in the past year, we've launched a partnership with the Palsy Library Consortium, which added 74 new LSA members as a group to our community. We're also in conversations with other consortium, USMAI, the Maryland Academic Consortium. They have been members for several years. And in 2018 or 19, I believe it was, the Canadian Knowledge Network joined as a consortial member as well. So this has led to a pretty significant jump in NISO's membership. The voting members are seen there in blue, and the LSA members are seen in red. You'll see the spike in 2021, that's Palsy. And so this has been a great addition to our community. Voting members has been relatively consistent. It dipped it dipped a bit in the mid-2010s, early 20-teens. At a low point, I think it was down to 68. And we're now back up to just about 100 voting members. So a little bit about our finances. These are next couple slides are some charts of NISO's revenue and expenses and surpluses over the last almost 20 years. In 2020, NISO's gross revenues were about 1.3 million, 1.32 million. In 2021, they dropped to about 1.17 million. Couple different reasons. You'll see, first of all, the drop in dues. As I just discussed, we have had success in bringing new members in, and that will be reflected in the next year's chart. In 2021, we did see a drop in membership dues revenue, primarily because of several large organizations, a couple large organizations withdrawing. And while we are adding new members, we're adding smaller members. So that's in part why the drop in income. We also, in 2021, there was a drop in revenue because of the NISO Plus conference, which moved from an in-person event with in-person registration costs and in-person expenses to a virtual environment in which we took a more inclusive approach towards the revenue there. And what we wanted to see was lower prices for participating in the virtual conference, but our costs were also lower. That I think proved successful in that we had, as I said, more than 850 participants, compared to, I think it was about 260 in person in Baltimore in 2020. So we had less revenue, but we also had less in terms of expenses. So here is a breakdown of our expenses by category. I should note both of these numbers for 2021 are pre-audit. All of the numbers prior to 2021 are part of our audited financials. We don't yet have a breakdown of the expenses by category in the way that we do from previous years. But you'll see in the purple, sort of the 1, 2, 3, 4th line up, you'll see the purple line there is pretty significant. That is the NISO Plus conference, and the income from that having spiked pretty significantly. You'll see that the expenses dropped. They were roughly 1.28 million in 2020, and in 2021 that dropped to about 1.08. So about a $200,000 drop in our expenses in 2021. So in 2020, the net of this was we yielded a modest $38,000 surplus. In 2021, that surplus increased to about $90,000. This is a chart of our yearly surpluses and deficits. Some of this is affected by NISO's receipt of grant income. So you'll see spikes in the net assets. You know, that would be NISO receiving a multi-year grant, and the way that works in generally accepted accounting principles is that income is all booked in one year, and then it's spent out over the next several years as we spend through the money. So it's seen as a surplus and then a deficit in the subsequent years. So you'll see that in 2020, 2011 is an example of that. 2007 is another example of that. In 2019, you'll notice there was a pretty significant deficit. That had to do with the merger related to NFACE. And we invested a lot in adding staff to the NISO, team, adding some resources to support that, and as well as prepare for the NISO Plus conference, which happened in 2020. So that's the deficit. That was a strategic investment, if you will, by the board in NISO's longer term success. And as you can see, NISO's kind of hitting on kind of gaining the benefits of those investments in 2019 as a result of the merger. So looking forward, the first thing I'd like to do is welcome our new board of directors, our new NISO directors. NISO's voting members conducted an election for the new directors in 2022 to 2025. Karim Bouguida has been elected vice chair of the NISO board, so he will serve as vice chair in the coming term, and then in 23-24 he will step up to the role of chair, succeeding Maria Stanton, who is stepping in as chair this year. I'm pleased to welcome Ryan Bernier, Angela Eklund, Patty Guinness, Allison Muddett, and Rhonda Ross, representing a very diverse spread of the NISO community, of large corporate organizations, nonprofit publishers, societies, all working together under the leadership of our executive committee. As I discussed, strategic growth is one of the things that we're going to be spending a lot of time focusing on, and we have several different strategies for growth in the coming year. The first is to continue to build on NISO's membership, and this will involve expanding into new market segments for voting membership, engaging internationally as much as possible through NISO Plus, through NISO Plus Forum, and other outreach activities that we've been doing to engage the international community and build awareness of what we're doing and hopefully build membership outside of the US. And we're also working to build more consortial partnerships to bring in more individual libraries into our work as well. The second prong tactic of our growth strategy is to focus on developing our grant funding pipeline. I mentioned we've, over the last year, received 2 grants. We are presently waiting on decisions on 2 more grant applications, and we have several other ideas about potential grant-funded projects that could support our work as well. And then the third element of this is the growth of the NISO Plus conference and related events. One of the things Jason will be talking about is we'll be launching a NISO Plus Forum, an in-person event later this year, in addition to the annual conference, which we will maintain as a virtual event. So that we can both foster conversations locally and focus them on the sorts of things that you can't do virtually, but we'll continue to have this large-scale virtual forum to build the inclusivity and engagement of a worldwide audience in our work that really isn't quite possible when we have, you know, an in-person meeting, regardless of where that in-person meeting might be. We're also we've got a lot of great ideas. All of this engagement, all of this interest is really driving people to bring new ideas to NISO. Now, these new project ideas are simply under discussion. They're not formal work projects yet, but to just give you a flavor of some of the things that people are knocking on our door and saying, hey, could you help us with? We've been having conversations about cooperative collections development and cooperative collections management, open access workflows. So how do institutions and organizations engage and manage the complex questions around transformative agreements and order processing, et cetera. There are a host of standards questions in that regard. There is questions around accessibility and files that are remediated, and how do we, you know, build awareness around the remediation of the sharing of remediated files for accessibility purposes. There's also just conversations around standardizing the books interchange format and adding that to the suite of XML standards that we have around publication structures. So that would be JATS and STS, expanding that to also include books as well. There's some conversations around data management plans and how do we describe what data management plans are. Ideas that come out of NISO Plus include multilingual content exchange. So how are we, you know, what kind of best practices might exist in creating a multilingual ecosystem for scholarly content exchange? And then how do we simplify the data exchange or the data entry process for authors, maybe using things like ORCID. The last 2 ideas are really ideas that came out of the NISO Plus conference. So you'll see we're continuing to focus on both ideas that are coming in from the community as well as ideas that we're generating through our own thought leadership conversations. There are some other fun things that are going on behind the scenes within NISO. One of them is the board has been having conversations around creating a value study of the economic impact of NISO standards. And this would probably be a multi-year project, but how do we assess and describe and quantify the value that is derived from NISO standards? How could we quantify the amount of time that is saved through the use of sushi, counter statistics standards? What is the impact of improved metadata or identifiers. The reason why we do what we do is to build efficiencies. Can we quantify those efficiencies? We're going to be spending a lot of time continuing the development back-end of our back-end systems. We are also looking to rationalize the NISO website support structure. So when projects come to NISO, oftentimes there's a website associated with it that was developed by those teams before they came to NISO. So we're developing a structure by which we can plug that into and more easily manage these new websites. And then finally, we are focused a lot on continued development of NISO Plus scholarship program, and how can we continually enhance that. We've had 3 cohorts so far. About 40 people have gone through the NISO scholarship program, and we're continually engaging those scholarship winners and helping them both through education and training, but also cohort development and community development. And we really want to develop that program more. And I'm hoping in the next couple months we'll be able to announce some expansion to that scholarship program. And then before I wrap things up and pass the microphone on to Nettie, I think it's really important to thank all of the people who engage in our work, either through NISO's leadership, NISO's board, but also the leadership committees and the working groups. We couldn't get all of the things that we get done without you involved and engaged in our work. So we are so grateful for all of the time and effort that you put into NISO's work. I'd also like to, on a personal note, thank the NISO team. I've showed this picture before a couple different times. This is still the last time that the NISO staff has all gotten together in person. This was at the end of the NISO Plus conference in 2020. I am hoping that in August we'll be able to all get together in person again, and I can update our staff team photo. But I am so grateful to have such an amazing group of people who are dedicated to NISO success. Jason, Sarah, Jill, Alice, Kimberly, Nettie, you all are amazing, and we as a community are all grateful for everything that you do for us. Here is our contact information. Please feel free to reach out, be that you have an idea about a story for information organized, you have ideas about NISO Plus, or ways in which NISO can support our diversity, equity, inclusivity activities, or even just you need your member records updated as people change. Please reach out to us. We are here to help and to serve, so thank you very much. You can also get in touch and stay in touch with NISO if you're not presently. You can sign up for our mailing lists. You can get our information organized, information on our educational programs, updates on our standards work, NISO Plus. You can use the QR code there to take you to the website, or you can visit our subscription page. So with that, thank you very much, and I will pass the mic and PowerPoint on to Nettie.
Great, thank you, Todd. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope everyone can hear me just fine. All right, so very happy to be here talking about all the stuff in the weeds.
Nettie, I'm sorry to
yes.
interrupt you, Nettie, but can you enlarge the slides?
Yes, how's that? Better?
Much better. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry, I was conserving real estate on my desktop, but that was not working. Thanks, Todd, for passing the baton, and I would also like to say thank you to everyone who participates in standards work. We really couldn't do it without you. Also, this is kind of sorting our standards activities by different phases of projects. And it includes many of our projects that have something new going on, but it also does not include many of the standing committees. So I want to also credit the people who are running the standing committees for projects that have been published and are in a maintenance mode. You can find out everything about all of our standards activities on the website. There's a header called standards committees, and all of the groups are listed there. So in the last year, we have completed 6 standards, and Todd had 7 in his list. I was counting from the last time we presented our annual members meeting last year. And I will just very quickly describe what these are. So JATS version 1.3 was published last summer, as was the Z39.4 criteria for indexes. So JATS is XML elements and attributes that enable exchange across journal articles. And criteria for indexes provides guidelines for the content organization for retrieval of documents and parts of documents via indexes. We also published 2 recommended practices in November. So you'll notice, I guess we were just moving in a certain cycle, July, November, and February. Content platform migrations is a new recommended practice that supports vendors and publishers who move from one platform to another, and also allows librarians to keep up to date on the changes that are going alongside with that. And then access and license indicators, that was a revision of a recommended practice, and it extended the recommended practice to add metadata for subsets of license information to help provide access in certain contexts. In February, we published the credit standard, and this is a high-level taxonomy that lists 14 roles that are typically played by contributors in the scientific publication process. And also around the same time published a new recommended practice for the ebook bibliographic metadata requirements in the sale, publication, discovery, delivery, and preservation supply chain. So as the title shows, that's quite a 360 view of how metadata is anticipated and recommended to move, be provided by stakeholders, help understand other stakeholders, and share metadata about ebooks. And then last but not least for the publications, JATS for R. So JATS for R is, I guess, a subgroup within NISO, and it is an initiative that's dedicated to creating best practices that optimize reuse and communications in particular areas of JATS. So they've published several recommendations for these, for how you might code abstracts, funding, permissions, and software citations in the JATS standard. We have several standards that are progressing now, and I think there'll be certain things coming up that you should be aware of. Most notably, there is a recommended practice draft out available for comment right now. This is our recommended practice draft for video and audio metadata. And this is available for public comment through a little more than a month from now. And what it does is it incorporates existing standards. It is not creating a new standard or new codes or new schemas. It simply provides guidelines for metadata and exchange of video and audio assets across different users of different metadata schemas. So how might you describe something for use in a particular context, or how might you understand something that's been described in a particular context? Several other drafts are completed and on their way to finalization and approval. The standard-specific ontology standard. This is a high-level ontology that describes a set of core concepts and relationships across the standards lifecycle. The working group is now finalizing its draft after we had a public comment period earlier this year. And then the standards tag suite. which identifies or defines XML elements and attributes that describe the full text content and metadata for standards. This is based on JATS. The draft is complete, and we are going to be sending a call to join the voting pool to the NISO voting members relatively soon. And similarly, a revision of the Ansi NISO Z39.7 standard. This is a standard that identifies definitions, methods, and practices that are relevant to library activities in the United States, and it supports the definition of quantifiable information in our field. There's some housekeeping work that I need to do on this, but I'm hoping that I will be able to issue a call to join the voting pool in the next few months as well. And then a few recommended practices that are underway in revision, specifically KBART, knowledge bases and related tools, working on its phase 3 recommendation. And we hope that there'll be a draft for public comment expected by early 2023, but we should know more by the end of this summer. And similarly, the transfer code of practice, which supports the transfer of journals from publisher to publisher and allows standard steps to be taken and communications to be made. That is also, I think, working on its version 5, or excuse me, version 4, hoping that that will be out later this year as well. So, oops, I think I went backwards. So some new standards projects. In addition to the standards that are completed, we are forming standing committees for the content platform migrations, the indexes work, and have also started new working groups for several areas that have been approved by NISO members. The content profile linked document standardization. This standard will support interchange of content and data for better communication and interoperability between and among organizations and systems. The correct recommended practice working group. This is an output of the Risers research by Jody Schneider of UIUC and NISO Plus 2021. And it's going to list the parties that are involved in the retraction process, along with their responsibilities to allow notifications and transfer of metadata that will communicate retracted research so that it can be dealt with properly and no longer signals as being in use. The journal article versions revision, this is updating this very well-known recommended practice published quite a few years ago, as you can see, to take into account current publication practices, including preprints, repositories, and applications of DOIs. The interoperable system of controlled digital lending is supporting interoperability and refining models that use existing ILL and circulation technologies, describing system interoperability requirements that support more common enabling of libraries to loan digital copies of print material while still controlling circulation to support their agreements. And then the peer review terminology standardization is a project that has come over from the STM organization that's developing standard definitions and best practice recommendations for communication of peer review processes. It is undergoing testing, and when the testing is finished, we'll be moving along in its standardization process. And then last but not least, JATS for R has 2 projects underway, currently one for authors and affiliations and another just starting for accessibility. So expecting those to be further along their way later this summer. And then in the wings, so some projects that have been approved by NISO voting members, and we will be starting working groups for these as soon as possible. Recommended practice for integrating publisher and repository workflows. This is a project that came out of NISO Plus 2021. And recommended practice for unique electronic resource package identifiers that will evaluate and create recommendations for unique identifier to enable disambiguation between packages of electronic resources that have been launched into the supply chain. And then a recommended practice to update author name changes in the academic publication record after publication as a result of identity change. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory in its title. And that's the end of my section, and I'm very happy to receive any questions or talk to anyone about the work. And again, so grateful that so many of you are participating in our work, and some of you participating on more than one project. So thank you.
Great.
Nettie. Sorry.
No, Alice, to you.
Thanks, Todd and Nettie. I will share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that all right.
You're good.
Thank you, Jill. Hi, everybody. I'm Alice Meadows. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for NISO, and I feel very privileged and lucky to also be the staff lead for a lot of the work that we do on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. It's something that I feel personally very strongly about, so it's a wonderful opportunity. And I also want to give a shout out to my colleague Kimberly Graham, our office manager, who is very much also involved and a tremendous help on all of this. So Todd's talked a little bit already about, at a sort of high level, about some of what we're doing and why we're doing it. I'm going to dive into a few more of the details. As Todd mentioned, one of our strategic goals for the current 3-year period has been around diversity and inclusion, and specifically we have objectives to increase participation of early career professionals, identify and develop new communities of stakeholder groups, develop and implement a diversity, equity and inclusion policy, and increase international engagement with NISO, as well as the worldwide impact of our work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our achievements, where we've got to on those. We haven't, I think, probably fully achieved, very hard to ever fully achieve all the goals that we all share around diversity and inclusion, but I think we have made some really good progress. So first of all, and again, Todd mentioned this, but I want to share a little bit more with you about our DEIA committee, which was set up in early 2021, very much led by Maria Stanton, who's the incoming chair of NISO, and was very much at the forefront of championing this. And so our goal for the committee is that it's charged with championing our DEI, I should say DEIA policy really at this point. We added the accessibility sort of middle of last year, as recognizing that it was very important for that to be a part of it explicitly. So the committee is charged with championing that policy, which was established early last year as well, in order to help achieve our goal of social justice in all our activities, including establishing priorities, identifying assessment criteria, and regularly monitoring and reporting on progress. And the idea is that the committee will also serve as a resource for the community, providing guidance on DEIA issues and advocating for underrepresented groups. And I think we have made quite a lot of progress on this. So last year, the main things that we worked on were we started off doing a community survey, which we got well over 200 responses to, and that really helped shape our thinking in terms of what we should prioritize, because obviously DEIA is a huge and somewhat amorphous collective term for that hides a lot of possibilities. So the community survey helped us focus a bit, and one of the things that came out of it was that there was a clear need on the part of our community for some more education and information about how metadata in particular could be used to support DEIA. So we ran a series of 3 webinars. They were open to all, and we ran them each one twice, so that people across all time zones could attend without too much difficulty. They were very well attended, very well received, and the recordings of all are available on our website if you didn't attend and or if you're interested. And we also made the decision last year to join C4DISC, which is the Coalition for Diversity and Inclusion in Scholarly Communications, which is a membership organisation for membership organisations such as ours that are committed to and want to effect real change in diversity and inclusion. This year, so far, the work of the committee has focused primarily on forming 2 subcommittees, one for education and events and one for standards, which have both met a couple of times at this point and are charged with really sort of helping support NISO's work and embed DEIA in our education and events programme and our standards programme. So it's fairly early days yet, but I think by the end of this year, you will see some concrete outcomes coming out of both those subcommittees. And I want to pause here and give a shout out, in addition to Maria, who continues to be involved, which is wonderful. We also have two fantastic co-chairs, Karim Bakida, who's the incoming Vice Chair, and Salma Ismail, who are both also fantastically helpful and supportive. So we really are very lucky to have such strong support at the leadership level in our organisation for this programme. And then the Education and Events Subcommittee is chaired by Wayne Strickland, who's on our board, and the Standards Subcommittee is chaired by Camille Collison, who's a member of the CRKN consortium. I think Todd has alluded to the fact that we're also applying for a grant to support our work in this area for the NISO Information Standards Leadership Programme. We're waiting the response on that. We got through to the sort of full application process part, and we should hear in the next few weeks if we're successful. And if so, that will constitute a large part of the work of the committee going forward as well. Excuse me. We've also at NISO have a number of other activities and initiatives related to DEIA that we've been working on. This is not an exhaustive list, but I hope it gives you a flavour of some of the areas of focus for us. My colleague Jill O'Neill, our Director of Content, ran a very successful series on DEIA, particularly focused at sort of small to medium-sized organisations that don't have their own resource dedicated to DEIA. In late last year, that was very well received, and I think we are hoping to repeat it at some point. We have the NISO Plus Scholarship Programme, which Todd mentioned. As he said, it's now, we've had 3 cohorts, nearly 170 applicants, and we at this point have 40 participants from 15 countries. This year, for the first time, more than half the successful applicants were from outside the US, which is a really wonderful way of starting to achieve our goal of spreading the word globally about our work and getting people involved. And not all of them, but I would say at least half, probably more than half of the participants across all 3 cohorts have really stayed extremely engaged in our work. They belong to our working groups, they volunteer for committees, they write for us, they speak for us. So it's been a really wonderful way of continuing to engage with people who we think are going to be the future leaders of our community. We continue to be involved in C4DISC. Rebecca McLeod, who's on our board, is our official representative on the steering group. I also sit on that with a sort of slightly different hat on due to my involvement with SSP. And then Kimberly is one of the project managers for a new toolkit that C4DISC is developing, which is a toolkit for disability equity. So that's, again, these toolkits take quite a long time to develop. There's already a couple available on the C4DISC website, but I'm really proud and happy that we're able to contribute in this way to this very important work. We've also more generally been looking to increase the diversity of our speakers. That's something that Jill does, I know, as part of her work on the educational programme, and Jason and I actively look to do the same for the NISO Plus programme, and I think we've been quite successful there. We're, as Todd mentioned, also looking to outreach more and more to organisations outside of North America, and we have new members this year from Australia, Hong Kong, India, Peru and the UK, which is wonderful, and hoping to continue to grow that. We already have some interest for next year from a library in South Africa, so really looking to expand that network of members that we have around the world. And we're also looking at expanding opportunities for more equitable participation in NISO's events more generally. I think Jason will speak a bit to this when he talks about NISO Plus, but I did want to show you a couple of examples of how our global reach is really growing. So this first map is a map of where our scholarship winners come from, and you can see it's really, apart from Antarctica, I think we have scholarship winners from every continent, which is fantastic. And then this is a map showing participants in our events today. This is attendees. It's by no means completely inclusive, as Todd mentioned, because most of our events are virtual. When somebody signs up for it, it's not always apparent which country they're coming from. And people also, members can attend our webinars free of charge, so don't have to register for them. So, but this I think is broadly representative, and you can see the top 10 countries here in terms of participation. This includes the NISO Plus conference, but there's a good spread of countries outside of the United States that are now actively participating in and attending our events. So I think that is it for me. And I will hand over to Jason. And like Nettie said, I'm happy if you have questions about our DEIA work, I'd be very happy to answer them either now or offline. And thank you all for your support on that.
All right. Thank you, Alice. I will share my screen. Hopefully that is visible to everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And, I'll echo all of the thanks for our members and all of the work that you enable us to do. I'm here to try and talk through sort of the idea behind NISO Plus and talk to you a little bit about what we've done this year and then the near future that we will be doing very shortly, and get you interested in participating in some of that work. So NISO Plus has been talked about a handful of times. Todd gave a fairly good overview of that, of the program as a whole, but it really started in late 2019 with us trying to strategize a way of refocusing the community around a certain type of event. And the first NISO Plus was held in person in 2020 in February, just a little before everything started falling apart because of the pandemic. And we really were trying to create a sort of new type of event that was really focused on conversation and community, right? With the goal of identifying where the needs were in the information ecosystem, and then finding ways to help shepherd those into projects and ultimately solutions. And that was the sort of overarching strategic goal for that first conference in February of 2020. In person in Baltimore. We had about 250 people for that, and it was a fantastic sort of test of the model that we designed for it. And then things got really interesting because, of course, with the pandemic and the move to virtual, we had to sort of reinvent the way we did things. And in 21 and 22, we went to a fully virtual conference, but maintained that focus on conversation and the focus on outcomes. That we wanted these events, we wanted this conference to be about getting people together to talk through issues, identify areas that needed to be worked on, and then move those forward into projects, and then ultimately, hopefully, solutions, right? So there's a very sort of clean set of goals that we have had for the NISO Plus events, moving all the way from the initial planning stages in 2019 all the way through to the most recent event in February of this year. And the move to virtual conferences has really given us a huge amount of global attention. We've gotten more people from more places participating in NISO events than ever before through the conference. You've seen some of the maps that Todd and Alice both showed you. I have one later in my presentation that I'll also show. But the global nature of getting as many voices in as many different places as we can to be a part of the conversation about the work that we do is really just so important to sort of the idea of NISO Plus, and will be continuing into the future. We will definitely be continuing in 23 with the conference as a virtual event, because we have the ability to sort of reach out virtually in a way that we obviously could never do if we were holding a physical conference in this manner. We are continuing this sort of conversation over presentation theme. We're, the plus 21 and 22 are all about getting people together to talk about problems. Alice mentioned a little bit about the inclusivity and the work we do with the NISO Plus idea to try to be as inclusive as possible, including things like with the virtual conference, making sure that we have sessions that are being held in multiple time zones so that we do have the ability to pull people in, not in the middle of their sleep, but instead to be comfortable in a time frame where they can participate freely in the conference. And so we have traditionally done this in two big swaths of time so that we can have people from the Americas, Europe, Africa, and then people from the Pacific, Asia Pacific area, all able to interact and be a part of our work. We have concentrated on making sure that the quality of the conference is extremely high. And then my favorite word, and the word that if you are a part of the conference in any way, you've probably heard me say before, but it's incredibly important for me that the NISO events be delightful to people, that they are pleasant, right? That they spark some joy in the work that we do, because it's important to do that as a part of the process. Now, NISO Plus, there we go. NISO Plus 2022, this past February, was incredibly successful. We had more than 650 attendees at the conference itself from 28 different countries, and 26.6%, almost 27%, from outside of the US. So we're, again, sort of really working hard to strategically expand our borders and really pull people in, so that we can have those voices as a part of the conversation. And what we ended up with at the end of the conference was over 50 ideas on a spreadsheet that were generated from the conference that were all potential projects. Obviously, as Todd sort of laid out in his presentation, we don't have the capacity to take 50 projects forward. But we do have a process, thanks mostly to Nettie, who shepherds the process of sort of winnowing the ideas down into reasonable projects. We do have projects that have come directly from and are continuing to be developed as a result of the work that comes out of NISO Plus. So if you have ideas for things that you need in your work, if you have projects that you would love to see in the world, NISO Plus is a great way to get those on the table and to get people talking about them and to gather a community around them so that they move forward as projects. 2020 we had Package ID. 2021 we had the CORAC project, the Retractions project, Publisher Repository Interoperability, and then the Controlled Digital Lending project. And then this year, 2022, we have a handful of things that are all still being worked through to identify sort of the exact project, but there are communities around these that are beginning to solidify and work those forward. Coming out of the 22 NISO Plus 2022, the multilingual and multicultural issues were an enormous amount of the conversation going on, having to do with metadata and more, relating to these issues in communicating across borders. And so this is definitely going to result in a handful of projects, I think, coming out of 2022. This has been an incredibly successful sort of way for us to move things forward. And so as a result of sort of what we've seen over the last 3 years, we have given a lot of thought to sort of what does it mean to sort of expand the idea of NISO Plus just a little bit, to move it from just the conference once a year in February, right, to something a little again more strategic, with a little more connectivity across the extent of the year. And so that's what we are now working towards. We're sort of moving ourselves into the next stage of what NISO Plus has the capacity to be. We're maintaining the sort of core ideas, right? Conversations become outcomes, and outcomes become projects, and projects become solutions. The sort of core strategy behind NISO Plus is going to be held true for any of the other events that we happen to do, but we do want to do other things with this as a core part of our work. So we are going to continue the virtual conference. We haven't announced anything about the 2023 virtual conference in February just yet, but that will definitely be happening. We have had a couple of opportunities, though, to expand what NISO Plus can be. This is yet another map of, this is actually each individual that participated in NISO Plus 2022. We obviously have a swath of individuals from across the world, and we are attempting to sort of take the NISO Plus ideas to places where we can. We had the opportunity just this month, actually, earlier this month, to talk about NISO and NISO Plus at the Japan Open Science Summit. So we're taking the opportunity to sort of go out and participate in global events and talk about the NISO and the NISO Plus efforts. And then sort of more close to home, we are going to try a couple of other events that have the NISO Plus name attached to them. And the first of these, Todd talked about very briefly, but I'll go into just a little more detail, is the NISO Plus Forum. And the NISO Plus Forum is going to be an in-person event. We want to start playing with the idea of having occasional in-person events, with the acknowledgement that obviously those are different than the large virtual events. The large virtual events are good for global conversations and getting many people together in a variety of ways. An in-person event such as NISO Forum, which is going to take place in September of this year, September 20th, is going to be a small, controlled size event. We are only going to have 100 attendees at this. We have 100 tickets, and that's it. We are going to run this in a very different way than a conference. This is going to be much more of a working meeting. We're going to have workshop type events where we're doing things in person that can only be done in person. We are going to focus very heavily on the in-person nature of this meeting, and so it will feel different and act different than the sort of conference events have, but it will be very much in that conversational, driving toward outcomes, identifying issues sort of vein of other NISO Plus events. All of the information is available all the information we currently have. We'll be sort of releasing things as we continue planning, but all of the current information is available at the NISO Plus website, niso.plus/forum. It is currently open for registration for members. Because of the limited nature of the tickets, we decided that we wanted to give members a little bit of an advantage in registration, so that we made sure that we could get as many members in as possible. And so from now until Wednesday of next week, it's members only registration. And then on Wednesday of next week, we will open the registration to non-members. Again, limited to a strict limit of 100 people for this event, and it will be September 20th in Washington, D.C. at the AGU Conference Center. And so all that information is available on the site. We're really excited about this as a way to build the community, and I will go ahead and spoil a little bit of the sort of future plans, in that we are doing this one in person, small in-person event. Our idea is this one is taking place in DC because it is a comfortable and familiar place, and we can sort of test the waters. If this is as successful as we hope it will be, our plan is to identify international locations and to sort of move around from community to community internationally, globally, in order to try and actually touch base with the information communities globally that we are making contact with. And so in 2023, we hope to be somewhere not in the US. And so this is an exciting endeavor for us. This is a really exciting place for us to be going. We also have one other thing planned this year, and we don't have a lot of details about this just yet, but I did want to make sure that I mentioned it so that it could get in people's heads. We have traditionally done a Humanities Roundtable here at NISO, and this year it's going to sort of enter into the NISO Plus, the sort of NISO Plus idea. We're going to be doing a NISO Plus Humanities Roundtable virtually, not in person, something virtually is in November of this year for the humanities scholars and community out there. So that is another thing that we will be doing. And the idea is, the sort of broader strategic idea is that we have a sort of virtuous circle happening in the NISO Plus efforts, right? We have a conference and we identify and prioritize ideas, and we have workshops to develop the ideas, and then we get those discussed at forum, new ideas identified, we have a humanities roundtable, and we move right back into the NISO Plus conference. And so we have a sort of circle of idea generation, idea evaluation, projects beginning, etc., so that we can continue to build this momentum that we have built over the last couple of years. So I'm super excited about where we are going, and where we have been is great. I think where we're going is even greater. So I'm really excited about the potential for some of these NISO Plus events. And that is the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing. There we are.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. There have been a couple questions that have come in, and it looks like Nettie has responded to a couple of them. Question for you, Jason, about the forum.
Yeah.
Will it be recorded and available afterwards for those who can't travel?
Yes. So that is we've had that actually asked to us a couple of times, and I am going to say, sadly, this is going to be an event that is not going to work recorded. That is, we are going to be working at tables in various places in a workshop fashion, right? It's not going to be a set of presentations or speakers or anything like that. And so it is not going to lend itself to capture, because it's just not that kind of event. There will definitely be an outcomes document of some kind, right? We will definitely like capture everything and do a with notes and do a write-up and everything. There will be an outcomes, but as far as actually capturing the thing itself, that's not really the sort of event that it's going to be.
Yeah, and building on that, one of our thought processes with regard to events is, when something makes sense to be virtual, we will do it virtually. And if we're going to have people together for a reason, we're trying to focus those in-person events on only those things that you can only do in person, that online interaction is not well suited for. The sort of, post-it notes and the workshop experience. So we're trying to be very intentional about when we bring people together and why. And it doesn't make sense in many cases to bring people together to just do PowerPoint presentations. We can do that virtually. What is the reason that we want to bring people together? And that's the rationale behind the forum. And because of the way we want to structure this in-person workshop experience, it therefore makes a virtual version really difficult. We have tried this in the past where we've had, a virtual event that had, a table with a microphone that was attached to the people participating, and that didn't really work very well. There was a question here, and this is worth capturing in the recording, from Andrew Pace about the Controlled Digital Lending Project. And there is obviously, for those of you not familiar, but I expect most of you would be, there is an ongoing lawsuit between a number of publishers and the Internet Archive around their implementation of controlled digital lending during the pandemic. And we are not, the NISO project is explicitly not dealing with the legal questions around when an institution might choose to use controlled digital lending. We're focused on the how, after an institution has decided that it is acceptable for whatever reason to pursue a controlled digital lending activity. So it's a process. It's a process-focused best practice. It's not a legal decision-making framework for when someone should do controlled digital lending. That will either be, most likely it will be determined by the courts, and each individual institution can take their own decisions about when fair use applies or first sale principle applies. That is not at all what NISO will be involved in providing guidance on. Happy to dig into the details there. CDL is, as Allison said in the question, rather complicated, absolutely. But we're more what we're focused on is the how, not the why, of what are the practices for taking something out of circulation, maintaining the one-to-one ratio of item to circulation, of how do you securely deliver something, ensure that it is deleted once it's or access is denied after that circulation period, whatever that circulation period might be. Those are the sorts of things that project is focused on. And then there was another question about an email list for LSA members. There is a variety of ways in which people can customize the information that they receive from us. That was on the slide with the QR code. And I don't see any further questions. If no one else has any further questions, I want to remind everyone that they can absolutely reach out to me directly or any of the NISO staff. We're happy to answer or address any questions or comments or concerns that you may have. And with that, we will draw today's annual members meeting to a close. I want to thank all of you for engaging with NISO, for participating in today's conversations about our activities, and I look forward to seeing you all hopefully in person at some point. Many of you hopefully will be able to get together in Washington for the forum. If not, you will see us all virtually at NISO educational programs and at a variety of other events. Thank you again to all of the volunteers and to all of the NISO staff for helping us make the last year and a half a great success. So thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye.